Hey everybody, my guest on the show today is Michelene Wilkerson. I'm just going to leave it at this. She's a community builder. What's a community builder, you ask? Well, I think we might find out, Michelene. So good to have you here. Good morning.
Good morning. I'm so excited to be here.
Yes, it is almost noon. You and I are both located in New York,
Let's
which
go.
is,
Brooklyn.
yeah, Brooklyn. That's right. This is a little bit different because usually I'm interviewing people from Europe. I've interviewed people in Ukraine, a lot of people on the West Coast, but we're both like close here, which is pretty cool.
It's like, we're in the
And
same time.
it's a gorgeous day in New York here at the end of April, which is awesome because it hasn't been that way for a while. And we got a lot to talk about today.
Yeah.
So let's get right into it.
Okay.
Michelene, what's something that you nerd out about?
For me, I nerd out on a few things. Number one, outside of work and everything that I do, I love nerding out on relationships. I love
Oh,
reading,
this is getting juicy immediately.
I love reading articles from the Gottman Institute. I love, following like work and, just like relationship psychology, attachment theory. So I just really like to nerd out on that. And I have to say, during the pandemic, I never thought I would become the person that dives into pop culture, but I
Mm.
love a little bit of pop culture tea for my life. In the past, I used to think this is so beneath me. I'm minding my business. I'm drinking my water and minding my business. But now I'm like, let me see what's happening over in
You're like,
Hollywood.
wait, who was spotted in Soho last week with who? What?
Yeah. And then probably the last thing I nerd out on is community.
Hmm.
And I think for me, it's just so interesting to see how this space has evolved so much in recent years. I feel like 6 years ago, 7 years ago, community. The first titles that you were seeing for community came up with co-working spaces. Like, oh, what's a community manager? And
Yeah.
now you have so many communities. You have co-working spaces, which, you can consider networks or communities. You have like developer products that have really strong cult communities tied to them. You have almost like community management systems like Circle, Mighty Networks that have popped up to help manage communities. So it's just really just seeing how this whole ecosystem is turning. And then just like thinking about, I would say just thinking about just how communities have evolved. When you think about Instagram, now those were seen as like pinnacles of virtual communities. But now like you're seeing like mass communities become so much smaller. And something that I'm noticing and I'm curious to follow is just seeing how communities are. I feel like there's like this, I don't necessarily know what to call it, but I feel like communities are becoming driven either around an influencer or a leader themselves. So I feel like influencers are, I could definitely see influencing, steering into the direction of community.
Yeah.
It's already happening. But then I'm also seeing community as journeys. You have these collectives of people, who are in the same life stage coming together or have some sort of like common purpose that they're trying to achieve collectively and trying to find their tribe. So I'm really curious to see what emerges, in that space. Mind
Yeah.
Valley, I think, has done a great job at that. Oni Circle as a startup, that is as a storytelling for women. So I'm really curious to see how this all plays out.
Did you just mention Mind Valley?
Yeah.
I just had Christina on the podcast, the CEO of Mind Valley. She's a founder of Mind Valley. I had her on last month, and she has a book coming out in June. We'll release that
Oh my
episode.
gosh.
She's delightful. Yeah, she's really cool. Really a cool person.
Love it.
Yeah. Let's see. I have a question about. I know we're going to talk more about community. I have a question about relationships. When I hear somebody say I nerd out on relationships, I'm always curious. Well, I'm always curious to glean from somebody who nerds out on the psychology things. What's something that you've learned about relationships, like scientific or just in your life, that surprises you?
I really think attachment theory has
Hmm.
really been, I mean, one, discovering that for myself, like learning that I have an anxious attachment type and just seeing like how your early relationships with your caregivers really does have an impact on your relationships, or for familial relationships has an impact on you, you know, for pretty much like the rest of your life. I mean, of
Yeah.
course, like you do the work, you try to work through the kinks, but seeing how that is kind of like the bedrock of how you see relationships,
Yeah.
you know, pursue relationships and vice versa. So I think that's been really fascinating to see,
Mm-hmm.
especially. I think that's been, I mean, in dating, that's a whole different topic though. So maybe I'll shut up for
No, we'll
that.
save the last. Well, we're gonna save the last 30 minutes for that. Just
Yeah.
35 minutes. Well, I did actually have a question. It's not about, not specific. I guess it's specific to you, but it's more generally because I've asked some other people, men and women, that are dating. I'm curious if you're out and you're going out on a date with someone, because I've been
Yeah.
married for a long time. I'm curious, this comes up. You start to have this conversation about familiar relationships and like how like pattern automatics, and the person that you're with has no clue. That's got to be a pretty tough thing to get over. Like, unless they're really learning to learn about it, because if you're distinguished about your patterns, but somebody else isn't,
Yeah.
that's going to be it's going to be tough to come together in some sort of, what I would say would be a quite, like connected experience in a
Yeah.
relationship.
I agree with that because, well, actually, I see it two ways.
Hmm.
Because just because you're familiar with like the familial systems that have influenced how you act doesn't necessarily mean that you know what to do with that, you know,
Yeah, good
information.
point. Yeah.
You know, so I think it's definitely a little it's I think for me it's shocking when someone hasn't, you know, observed that or even started connecting the dots on that at all. But at the same time, you know, if someone, let's say that their family doesn't say that I love you, you
Hmm.
know, and that's something I've noticed, you know, and I think it's a general challenge. A lot of people struggle with affection and opening
Yeah.
up and being vulnerable. You can know that you're not vulnerable. You can know that, you know, your parents, no one really said I love you, and process that. But does that mean that you are now going to turn into an open receiving person? So I think it really depends on what you do with that information
Mm-hmm.
once you find out.
Yeah. Thanks. Appreciate it. I think we'll probably get more into this in the second half. That's going to be all about, you and relationships and getting to know you, and where people could find you on, all the dating apps. No, we're not going to do that unless you want to. We can use this platform to get you set up if that's what you want. It
I
is,
am
you are the
on
guest.
sabbatical from
You're sabbatical from dating. That's good. You're like, if you want to build community with me, sounds good. If you want to date, hard pass. Unless you're a specific celebrity that you geek out about, then maybe it's a possibility. There we go. If they're listening. So, Micheline, what's something that is really inside of your comfort zone that is something that other people just are not comfortable with?
Yeah, sharing vulnerability, hands
Mm-hmm.
down. I
Yeah.
Over time, I think just growing up, and I think this has to do with me being a young Black woman who grew up in a single parent household in a low income community. For quite a while, I think it wasn't until high school, I was really ashamed of my story. I was ashamed of different bits and pieces of myself. And something actually on the topic of family and thinking, you know, about this whole topic, you know, my dad struggled with addiction.
Mm.
So at a certain point, I was very uncomfortable, you know, with that. And especially going to PWIs, or for those who don't know, predominantly white institutions or
Mm-hmm.
schools where there are very few people of color who had any kind of similar experience in that way. It's like, wait, I am the outsider here. I do not have, you know, I grew up in a fine neighborhood, but I didn't grow up in a middle class neighborhood. I did not have two parents. So it was just like all these questions I had inside.
Yeah.
It made me very uncomfortable with those pieces. So I tried to hide it as much as possible. And even at one point, told people that my dad died because I was tired of getting questions about
Mm.
where's your dad? And
Yeah.
some people just like, assume like, oh, that's the norm, like two parent households, that is normal. I mean, now I think our society has made so many strides in embracing single parent households, but at
Yeah.
that point in time, absolutely not. So I was deeply uncomfortable with that. So was always hiding. But there was a turning point, I think, once I did get to high school. And, I realized that there was power in my story, and using that story to like really just like even, I mean, just using that story to drive people to connect with me, and also helping people to feel comfortable in their own skin.
Mm.
And I think that, was extremely important, like my senior year of college. I mean, my senior year of high school. So just embracing those parts. And
Yeah.
now at this point, my story is my story. I
Yeah.
am the author of that story, and no one can, make me feel that, whatever has happened to me in my life, just make me feel uncomfortable about that. I'm past that point. I mean, of course, like there are things that all of us will keep private to ourselves, but
Yeah.
I'm not hiding. There's a difference between privacy and hiding. And I think for me, my power is in sharing vulnerability. And I realize that over time, that has given other people permission, to feel okay in themselves or whatever they're going through. And I think that's actually been like a huge crux of how people have been able to connect, resonate with me,
Yeah.
because I am comfortable with myself.
Yeah. Well, thanks for sharing it here and
Yeah.
recording it for for all of history, or as long as people are listening to this. So what's something on the other side of that coin, something that you are uncomfortable with? There's other people that are good to go. They enjoy it even.
Say that one more time.
What's something that's on the other side of that coin that is outside of your comfort zone, and it's something that other people, it's in their comfort zone?
Yeah, I think for me, it's taking command and taking presence, and
Mm.
there's kind of like an irony in that, because when you do share your story and when you are comfortable in yourself, wouldn't you be comfortable just exuding command? For me, that has been a struggle. And I think this is the challenge, and probably one of the unique experiences of being a woman of color. It's like, how much
Hmm.
space do I take up before people become uncomfortable with my presence? And then what is the consequence of people becoming uncomfortable with my presence? And then the last piece is, well, if I do take command and let's say things don't go right, how many doors are going to close behind me?
Yeah.
So just kind of, there just becomes a lot more responsibility with that. And, just sometimes getting caught up in a paralysis where others are just like, hey, I don't know, I don't have all the answers. And I know I don't have all the answers, but I will steer this ship. We will get to
Yeah.
where we need to go.
And what you're sharing is, people listen know I like to be like, just kind of like sometimes externally process going through me. Like I have the exact opposite experience as a white man. I'm not expected to share vulnerably, and I'm talking in a business context.
Yeah.
I'm not really expected. I mean, I'm sure people would be okay with it, but it's not something that's like, oh, he's got to share. And then I am expected in the places that I either own or that I'm expected to bring presence and command. Like that's part of the expectation. I was in sales for 20 years. That's part of that job, is
Yeah.
that you have a certain amount of presence. And now with the kind of work I do now, it's expected. So it's really interesting. As you were saying that, I go, man, I'm such the I think my experience is so opposite, which would make a lot of sense
Yeah.
as a middle-aged white man, and like you said, a younger woman of color. And it's also really interesting because like there's probably, I mean, obviously would know there's room for me to be more vulnerable. There's definitely room for you to bring more presence, and it's all going to work out and be okay. But for both of those, I think we might both have fears, like
Yeah.
fears
And
about that. Like,
I'm curious for you, like what that pressure is to always bring presence.
I get paid to do that in quite a few of the things I do. Like as a trainer, as a facilitator, as a speaker, if you don't bring presence, people aren't gonna. You need to bring something.
Right.
So that's what part of it is. And, like, I think if we're talking about presence and command, though, it landed for me, and I think I'm in the same context with you. That means something very specific, but that's actually quite subjective.
Yeah.
Such a subjective thing. Oh, that person has presence. Oh, like, what is it about them?
Right.
People go, I don't really know. They just have
Yes.
just really like their vibe or their energy, or they know they know techniques, or they like, some of it is technique, but some of it is just like our being, who we are.
Yeah.
And, maybe the challenge for both of us is to take a swing at both of those things. That's like maybe not quite as easy. Well, and it's not just a how to. I don't think there's a how to. Like, hey, here's the four-step process to be more vulnerable. I mean, you could create something like that, would feel pretty false. So I was like, hey, Michelene, let me teach you the 3 steps to bring more presence. You'd be like, this is weird, right?
Right.
It has to be authentic. You're like, what?
Where did Caesar go
Yeah,
to the 3
exactly.
steps?
Exactly. Let's take a brief break, and we'll come back and we're going to talk more about all these things. We'll be right back after this.
The Talking to Cool People podcast is brought to you by Jason Frizzell Coaching. Jason works with amazing people who are looking to find and develop their passion and purpose and create their journey to wherever it is they want to go. Check us out at jasonfrizzell.com, Facebook, or on Instagram. Jason loves hearing from anyone who thinks it would be cool to connect, to be coached, or to be a guest on our show. Email him at podcast@jasonfrizzell.com or DM him on Facebook and Instagram. And now, back to some more amazing conversation on Talking to Cool People.
And we are back. What else do you want us to know about you?
Yeah, I think.
What a great question for somebody who's comfortable with vulnerability.
Yeah, I think the thing to know about me is that, well, I'll say this, and this is something I've learned over the years because I used to be very, and I still am in some ways, but I've become a lot more comfortable. Well, my ideologies on work and life have shifted over time. I used to be very like, oh, like I have to get on Forbes 30 under 30, by 26. And if I'm not, I'm a failure. And I think for me in recent years, who I am is evolving. And, beyond the surface of work, who I am, I'm an ambiverted, quirky, adventurous whimp, and I'm the kind of person, I'll speak truth to power, but don't ask me to kill a bug. Don't ask me. Sometimes I am a creature of habit. And what I'm learning in this chapter of my life is embracing the very ordinary pieces about myself.
Yeah.
I don't have to be extraordinary. And I think there was a certain point in my life, and I remember just in 2018, that was a tough time. Mm-hmm. And I just remember coming back from therapy one day. I don't remember what the conversation was about, but I remember thinking, two of the people who I love the most in the world are my godparents, and they are the most ordinary people ever. They are retired, were teachers, for 20 plus years, and they live in a little orange house in upstate New York. And when I ask them about how their day is, they'll be like, oh, we saw the hummingbirds fighting again. And I'm someone I've become, I love stillness. I appreciate stillness. And, I love spending time with my loved ones. And I think that became very clear to me during the pandemic. My father had passed away. And it was just like, wow, I wish I would have spent more time with him. I can make, I made money. I've done cool things, worked with cool people, but I would trade it all just to go take a walk on, the Coney Island boardwalk and have Nathan's hot dogs with my father. So I'm just someone, I am a person who is constantly evolving, figuring myself out. And I'm okay with that. Mm-hmm. I don't have to have all the answers. And I would say if there was anything to kind of like a metaphor and analogy, I would say I'm definitely like a tree. Actually, I've become so fascinated with trees
Mm.
I say I'm like a tree. I mean, it's probably the most generic analogy, but so as I've been learning more about trees, like it's blown my mind a little bit. One, like trees aren't always growing.
Nope.
I think we've gotten into this generation, this era, growth by any means necessary. And there's good growth and there's bad growth, but we don't like to
Yeah.
acknowledge the bad growth. I have a lot of weeds in my backyard. Weeds
Mhm.
grow pretty tall too.
Yes, they do. And much faster
So,
sometimes.
yes, much
Much
faster.
faster all the time, actually.
Right. And, so I've acknowledged that, so I'm taking, there are seasons of growth for me. There are seasons of stillness for me where I'm like, I'm okay just being. And I think something that I really appreciate about trees is, when you cut a tree and you get it down to its trunk and you see all of the roots, the rings tell like a really beautiful story.
Mm-hmm.
And part of the story that rings tell is you can see if you look at how tight rings are to each other, you can see that is a time of rapid growth. If a ring is thicker, that was a very fertile season.
Mm-hmm.
But there, some seasons where those rings are so thin, and that means those are like seasons of drought. You can see scars on the tree trunk, and that's indicative of just the things that tree lived through. So
Yeah.
I am a person who's gone through things, and I'm here. I'm standing in who I am.
Must be nice.
Yeah.
Must be nice most of the time.
Yeah, most definitely. Because it's not perfect every day, but
Well, if you
is...
figure that out, please let the rest of us know. That would be great. Don't hold that secret back from all of us out here. And I mean the whole world. That'd be
That's
amazing.
A lottery ticket that everybody needs.
Yeah, that's your trillion. That's the first $1 trillion product idea. You're like, here it is. This is the thing. Done. You just have to announce when you launch this thing on this podcast, and send me an affiliate link so I can make some money off this too.
I will pass.
Okay.
Yes, we'll charge for your healing. That is the wave now.
Yeah. What do you want to ask me that I can answer for you and for everybody listening?
Something, that I would love to ask you is, if you had to name this chapter of your life right now, like what would you name this chapter?
Damn. That is a very different question than what I usually get. What would I name this chapter? I would name this chapter Expansion. Yeah. I've been where you are, and as somebody who's studied relationships and psychology, I don't know if you've ever read about like midlife, it used to be called the midlife crisis. Sometimes now it's just called like self-actualization. And they say that, have you read about this? And I think somebody said like women, it's kind of studies, it's kind of meta science, but it's like women self-actualize in their late 20s, early 30s, and men generally go through that a little bit later.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it took me leaving a corporate career and doing all the things I do now to really understand like what I'm really best at, what I'm here that's meant to do. And I've really leaned into that in my profession, but also in my private life in a number of areas. And I'm just feeling myself expand everywhere because it's like leaning into the things that I know to be true. And so I would say expansion. The other thing would be like, I'm having a shitload of fun. Like sometimes I'm like, I can't believe I do this for a living and that it's this fun. Cause I always had and I liked my career. I didn't leave my career because I hated it. I actually really like sales. And I was a technology sales. I love technology.
Right.
But I was like, is this fair that you get to make good money in this cool profession and actually have fun working with people that I get to work with and do this and have this sort of conversations? And this podcast, my other podcast are like, how do I get to sit here with you and have this awesome conversation I'm taking so much from and have this actually be part of what I do? Like, that's pretty cool. So expansion and fun would be what I would name him. Yeah.
I love that. I love that so much, especially fun, because I think we're taught so much that if it's fun, that means that it's recreational. That means that it's not purposeful.
Yeah.
And we've been taught to associate struggle with glory and struggle with achievement.
Yeah.
And I do want to get back. I mean, I think I'm having fun right now, but it's more like a slow fun. It's not like,
Yeah.
fun can mean so many different things to so many
Yeah.
different people. But
Yeah.
like who wants to say struggling,
Yeah.
but I mean, I think there is a narrative around struggle. And if you're not struggling, is it really worthwhile? Which, I mean,
Right.
of course, struggle is inevitable. I mean, it's just part of the human experience.
Yeah. Yeah.
There's no way to avoid it. And there is a meaningfulness in struggle that, you can only get because you have to go through something and
Yeah.
really be in the deep of it,
Yeah.
which can come with so many self-learnings, world learnings that, fun, like you don't have to sit deeply when you're having fun.
That's right.
And I think that is the value of struggle. But
Sure.
no, I'm here for the nap ministry.
Yeah. Awesome question. I'm finding as I do this podcast, I think I've recorded, it'll be like 175 or so recorded. And I'm finding that some of the questions are starting to repeat because if you've done this 175 times, nobody's ever asked me that. Thank you.
Yes.
Look at that. Look at that. Do you have anything else quickly I can answer for you? Or do you want to move on to the rest of the interview?
I would totally, like if you could go
She's going to take over. She's good, by the way, audience. She's taking over. Look, here you go.
This
coming
is
to my own
this
show.
is the second half where Michelene
This is it.
takes over.
She's like, we're not talking about my dating life. Instead, you are now the guest.
Yeah, I think, the question I would ask you is if you, were to go back to 28 years old, like what did that frame in your life look like? And what was like the biggest learning that you took from it?
This is an interesting question because when I was 27 and turned 28 the year I moved to New York from Minnesota. So that was a huge, like one of the people like, hey, what's the turning point? My biggest turning point was moving to New York because I ended up meeting my wife 2 years later and we're still here. But I think if I look at that as like, what would I tell myself now looking back? Is that like, that would be like, one, this is going to be a little woo-woo, but the universe conspires in our favor.
Yeah.
And so if I look at, and for some people that means like Christian God, some people that means like, it doesn't matter what that means to you. I'm not going to get into that here, but it's like, if you're, I believe karma is really a thing in some ways. And yes, there are horrible things that happen to wonderful people. Like there's no getting around that.
Right.
But if I look back at the different kind of turning points in my life and some of the things that have happened to me, I can just really be like, the universe has conspired in my favor. That's led me to here today.
Yeah.
So I would say that's one. And it leads to the second thing is the advice I would give myself. And I still need to give myself this advice all the time because I'm just not good at it, is like, don't be afraid to ask for help and tell people you don't know. When I was 28, I was probably, when I was 28, my guess is, and I worked in a technical role. My guess if you interview like my bosses and stuff, they go, oh, he's a really good employee, like easy to work with. But I was the person who would be the last person to ask for help because that would mean something about me. Yeah. And I'm still working on that. But man, life is so much more fun when you do it with cool people around you. And that doesn't have to be that can be a work relationship. Like, hey, listen up. I don't actually know the answer to this thing because, quite frankly, there may not be an answer. Can we brainstorm it together? Can we ideate? Yeah. Or if you're expected to know the answer, just be like, I know this is my job, but honestly, I'm a little confused. Can we just spend 10 minutes talking through it? I would be the person who would like either fake it till I made it, which there is value in that in a lot of ways. Right. But also, just like, don't be afraid to invest in yourself is the other thing too, whether that be the therapy, coaching, you want to learn to play an instrument, you want to learn to be an actor, you want to take trainings to get better. And Warren Buffett says the best investment you can ever make is in yourself, hands down. And no company is ever going to provide you like you said, the personal development stuff. That's going to do that. So if you're like, well, I can't afford this, or I can't afford therapy, I can't afford this. Can you afford to be 60 and have that trauma still coming up for you every day? Can you afford to be divorced? Can you afford to have your kids hate you? All these things. And just
That was a real one right there. That's gonna
that's
hit
a
some
real one. It's true. I mean,
kids
it's
say,
true. Can you, like the question is, how can you not afford this? And there's a different question of, do you believe this is the right modality or right approach? That's a different conversation than you got some stuff. If you're trying to work it out yourself, you're unlikely to do so. Science has proven that you are unlikely in your own head to be able to work out the things you talk about, family trauma, family of origin things. If you're interested in like executive coaching or whatever, spiritual coaching, like it's just proven that having a person to guide you and be with you who's good at that work is a game changer for most people that do it and do the work. So that's the other thing I'd say, because I didn't really do that. I worked at a company, I got training, my bosses were great. I never had any, like, they were all really good people, but I think I had this assumption that they were invested in like my thing. And like, the truth is most people aren't, because they're like worried about themselves and their family. And the last thing I would say is, don't take yourself too seriously, which is why I'm having more fun now. Cause I've had complete F ups here on the podcast, or when I'm coaching people are like, hey, like, oh man, just realizing I totally messed that up. Oh, that's okay. Like, can we clean it up and move on, versus like,
yeah.
oh my gosh, the world's going to end. And I think most people you meet, like your godparents, if you're like, they don't take themselves too seriously anymore. They're like, we're teachers. We're teachers. We've seen it all. We're enjoying the hummingbirds. And I think that's just something that that's one of those things that everybody, like if you interviewed a bunch of 70 and 80 or 90-year-old people, which I think you want to get perspective on life, go interview senior citizens, like people that are retired. You ask them what we should care about now. They'll tell you the things. Yeah. And you and I'm still working. My wife's still working. They'll tell you what we should care about. We'll go, no, I can't do that. Yeah. It's one of those things that like, we know this intellectually, but we can't do it until
it's very hard to apply.
And emotionally, it's very hard. You're like, yeah, but you don't understand. My boss is this, and my paycheck is this, my rent is this, and this and this, and this. And they're like, uh-huh. So yeah, I got a whole bunch. I mean, this question is awesome. I might have to add this to my interview repertoire.
Oh my gosh!
Can I license this from you?
Yes.
Is this a freebie? Very good. Man, thanks for the awesome question.
Yeah.
Awesome question. Michelene, let's see, what is it that you're most passionate about?
Yeah, I would say for me, recently, I would say, that's a question. I mean, there's so many different ways of answering that. I think like
long walks on the beach.
One thing I've definitely become, I would say, passionate about, or just something that just lights the fire under me, is our spontaneous adventures. I love amusement parks. So I, definitely make time like each season to make sure that I'm going to an amusement park. It just reinvigorates the child in me. And, it's something that I can do alone with friends. So that's something, and it's like amusement parks, like passion. Yeah, because it gives me zest. It gives me, just like that extra pep in my step. I would say, I'm also passionate about connecting with my loved ones. And I understand the value of that so much more, especially at this point, having lost a parent. I mean, like billions of people here on this planet and before me, it's a collective human experience, but it made me cherish the people who are closest to me so much more. So I definitely try to get time in with the people who I care about the most. And then the last thing I would say I'm getting back into is writing. Nice. Yeah, I really do enjoy writing, and I haven't done it. I've done it on and off, and it's really funny because my writing at times have opened up doors for me and it's like, wow, if I just wrote consistently, who knows how many other doors that this could open. I wrote my whole gateway into venture capital was because I wrote like a think piece about the pandemic for the Wings newsletter. I was really just talking about Black preservation and, just thinking about how my upbringing with my mom, lockdowns. And, I was just like, at the top of the pandemic, I was thinking like, why does this feel so familiar in my body? Why? And when I really thought about it, you know, and I could almost just like hear my mother just like saying like, no, like you can't go outside. You can't be outside with anybody at any time of hour of day. And it was her protection, my Black mother's protection over me and my sister. You know, like you can't just be frolicking, you know, at any time. So she was very strict. So I stayed in the house a lot. I was very sheltered, you know, and was not allowed to go outside except on occasion, you know, or school trips, pending grades. So I'm getting back into writing because it helps me to reconnect with myself, process my observations of the world, and process things that are happening in my life. So I really do enjoy it.
Nice. Thanks.
Yeah.
I really admire writers. It's something I've shared a lot on the show. I hate writing, which I think is why I'm a podcaster. I'm like, I can literally talk to people all day long. We could be here for the next 12 hours and be like, let's keep going. But writing, I don't like it. I just don't like writing.
It is not for everybody.
No, which is also why ChatGPT is awesome. Cause I like to write like very basic things. And then I did this yesterday. I had to write some marketing copy and it's like, here's my basic idea. ChatGPT rewrite this in 3 paragraphs. And I was like, this is really good. That technology is a really nice game changer for somebody like me.
It is. And it seems like there are a couple of startups really trying to, you know, shake things up in the copywriting space. Just watching Jason Calacanis the other day, and I forget the name of the startup that was on his show.
Yeah.
And, you know, they were talking about, you know, how their startup is basically looking to transform copywriting. Ironically, I've never been copywriters, didn't know what copywriting was before.
Yeah.
Starting the startup. They're like, yeah, we're going to transform the space. And then I was also just reading on The Verge. There was this person, he just over a weekend, he had, you know, GPT analyze his group chat with his friends over the last 7 years and then created a replica group chat to see like what would happen. And, you know, so that was really interesting as well, especially since like now you have like these, you know, language learning models, like who, you know, that are piecing together the context now. So the mannerisms of the group chat were very similar to his friends. The date pieces were a little bit off, but the mannerisms were pretty spot on. So I'm really curious to see like how, you know, this takes shape, especially in the creative space.
Yeah, I asked it yesterday. I asked it to write me a song in the style of different bands. Like I named the band and said, hey, write me a style in this song of the band, which isn't like a huge stretch for AI, I don't think, because then go, oh, what band, what genre are they? Let me write a song that's gonna. But a few of the songs, like I asked it to write me a Michael Jackson song.
Oh gosh.
It was a very much an R&B Michael Jackson song. Some of the lyrics were a little hokey, and somebody I was in a group, they're telling me that they asked it to then drop. They're a musician. They're like an electronic musician is one of their hobbies. And they asked it to create some stuff that you could put lyrics on top. And he's like, it was really good.
Oh my
He's like, oh, do it in like 88 BPM.
You have to send that to me.
Yeah. I'll have to, you might know the person. I'll have to get connected with him. But yeah, it was I'll send you a couple of the transcripts of these songs. They're hokey, but I will say this about the AI stuff. There's a study that says with 50% certainty that I think it's 2026, AI will be able to write a top 40 hit and none of us will have any idea that an AI wrote it. And now it'll be able to do the whole thing. The lyrics, it'll play like all of it could be done by AI, which is, as a musician, I don't love that.
Right. But I was just thinking about this the other day too. I was like, here we go.
Yeah. Well, as we start to wrap up here, I'm curious, what's something that you're afraid might be true about you?
Like, I know what it is. I definitely know what it is, I think. But do I think it's completely true? I think I'm fighting that narrative right now.
Go with it.
I'll share it. I think sometimes I question, am I built to lead? And I know skill wise I can, but it's the confidence piece and getting in my head entirely too much and feeling, you know, feeling that, would I be enough? And I think that
Mm-hmm.
is the challenge. I think that's the skill wise, and I know intellectually I've got it.
Yeah.
I can do it. I definitely can. It's just about putting the confidence, the pedal to the metal on the confidence. And really, and I think it goes back to the taking up space piece and, you know, trusting, trusting, like I'm comfortable with who I am, but trusting my power, trusting my intuition, trusting my vision, and having deep conviction in that is the next step for growth for
Yeah.
me. And I'm definitely getting along the way. I'm overcoming,
Yeah.
you know, the doubt and starting to quiet things. But
Yeah.
that is an ongoing challenge
Mm-hmm.
within.
My guess is if we were to do a poll of 100 people and you said, have you experienced this? I think everybody would say yes to that.
Yeah.
Things kind of are designed as humans in a way. Some people just
Mhm.
have some people just don't care about the feeling. I think they either don't care, they're like, they just know. And, we go back to what I wish my 28-year-old self would know. One of the things that I think it sounds like you're in the process of learning too is none of this stuff is really nearly as scary as when you just go out and do it.
Yeah.
Like everybody's still alive. And I say this to my wife about parenting, but I think it's true a lot of it. I'm like, is everybody still alive? Yep. Is anything burning? Nope. Okay, then it's going to be okay.
Yeah.
And I think like the stakes in a lot of these things, I really appreciate you saying that because that resonates for me, and I'm sure that like the leadership thing specifically is like, oh wow, wait, there's a bunch of people, and I hear leading is like managing and leading, but I think also like leading with your voice in the world, just being a leader, like a thought leader. You said as a writer, you said you've written some pieces, like all that. So thank you, really appreciate that.
And that's a real thing too,
Yeah,
because leading is so much more to me than just managing, a collective. It's, as much as possible, especially if you're bringing people together under some sort of mission or some sort of goal or direction, actually making sure the collective is getting there, where you promise that you're going to get them. And especially once all the obstacles start popping up, and yeah, I think that's the biggest piece, and helping people become better, because, you don't want to lead a collective of people and they become worse
no,
over time because they were under your guidance. And I think, especially in
yikes.
startups, work, that happens so much. And
Oh yeah,
it's like really, I mean, no leader's going to be perfect,
yeah,
of course. And I think we can have so much. I think something that's missing from today's conversation is grace for leaders, grace overall, grace and forgiveness, especially in the context of work. It's like, oh, you messed up. You're a horrible human being. You have no chance for redemption, or it's you versus us. And it's when you really peel behind the layers, you really do see that even, I mean, the leaders have so much that they may be going through. And I've
yeah,
learned that. But yeah, as much as possible, like, how can people be better around me? You know, and
yeah,
how can I bring out the best in other people? And even if they go in their own separate direction at some point, is this an experience that helps to get them closer to where they need to be for all the
yeah,
right reasons, you know?
yeah. It's
Yeah.
beautiful. Yeah. Let's see. I'm gonna ask you to wrap up. How do you see the world?
Hmm. Right now, how I see the world, I have a lot of questions of the world right now. I'm definitely a bit scared. because of, one, we just got out of a pandemic, and I'm like, wait a minute. The horrible analogy that I use to just describe the pandemic, but in my mind space, it just felt so spot on for me. I'm like, it just felt like a bad mashup of Lifetime, Nigerian movies, and Black Mirror. Just fuse them all together.
Really
into
did.
one.
Yeah.
And I'm kind of like, okay, we just got out of, the pandemic. Is level 2 about to be climate change? What is level 2? So I think I definitely think about that at times, for sure. But I think probably the thing that disturbs me more, and the thing I have questions about, is like, when will the internet and real life become, I guess, when will the illusion become like hard to separate? Because in the
really
world,
is a Black Mirror episode. Now we're actually talking about Black Mirror.
Yeah. So it's like, in the world of deep fakes,
Yeah.
where you can have other people embody others, and, that's supposed to be consent driven by the folks like who are driving this. But when you're democratizing, just generative AI in this example, and you're trying to give access, yes, like there will be plenty of people who use it just for, plain comedic purposes. But, even for like the instance of like consent, it's like, wait a minute, in an internet culture that doesn't value consent, how will this now play out? And then you've now unleashed something that people can use for good, for their fun and pleasure, or for the worse.
Yeah.
So I just wonder if at some point, I don't know when, but I feel like, at least for me personally, I can't speak for trends. I'm not a forecaster, but I just know when that line becomes too blurred, I'll just have to kind of quit the internet, except for research, for work, or just for work purposes specifically, because that's a bit terrifying for me. But what gives me hope and how I'm seeing the world, again, I think it comes back to the people who I love. And I had a conversation with my godmother, in the peak pandemic, and my mom as well. But something that my godmother had said that I still remember to this day, I asked both of them, like, how do you get through, scary times like this? My mom had said, well, I've actually, obviously I've never been through anything like this. So, I'm just as scared as anyone. But my godmother, I said, you know what? She said, every era has been scary. And just like, when I really think about it, and she was naming the eras that, scared her, as a 60-something-year-old woman. And yeah, I was just like, you know what? Yeah, that's very true. So I mean, with all the conversations happening today, and, folks are like, all right, might as well start counting down to the end of time. When will we destroy ourselves? When will AI outpace humans? What are we unleashing? There has been so many terrifying eras. So I think I'm like, I have to just step into this along with everyone else. And I think the beauty of this very strange time is that, and especially 2020 to 2021, there's just like this collective, like, yeah, like we really, even though it was like that 1 year, it's like this collective, okay, we're all going through this universal, we're going through this together. And I just have to remember that. And I think, what gives me hope as well is just, I mean, for me right now, I'm based in Brooklyn. It's sunny outside. The birds are chirping. And I say that, and I bring it back to the deep appreciation of the ordinary. Because right now, I remember in the midst of the pandemic as well, I was, people in Brooklyn were really bored and constantly blasting fireworks. And I'm someone who's not affected by large sounds too much. I'm kind of like, oh well. But it was so loud that it sounded like bombs dropping. So I'm like, you know what? While I have this peace, I'm going to appreciate it, because I could be someone in the world. I could be in Ukraine running for my life. I could be in, in a society run by a dictatorship. There's just so many, and there's so many directions that can be taken. But no, I'm here in Brooklyn where the birds are chirping and it's sunny outside and there's peace on my block. So I may have these other fears about the world, but I'm choosing to be present with what's happening right now, because I can be in so many other realities right now that people are living through. So it's gratitude. Yeah.
Nice. Yeah. So some dark Black Mirror stuff combined with gratitude. I like it.
Great way of putting it.
You're like, the robots, we're dead. The planet's about to implode or explode. And at the same time, I'm just grateful for the birds outside in Brooklyn. I like it. I like it. I like it. This is the paradigm of mission. Today, what am I going to be today? I don't know. I'm going to be a doomsdayer, and at the same time, I'm just going to tell you, take a deep breath.
It's like sometimes
I like it.
I've been reading so much more news, and I mean, actually, there was a study done recently on just like news headlines, like sentiment, headlines analysis done, and I mean, which it makes perfect sense, but just seeing how much negative headlines have grown over time, neutral headlines going down, like
yeah. All right. It was awesome to have you on. If people want to reach out to you and connect with you, I know you are a connector, you are a community builder. We didn't talk a lot about that today, but just to give you a plug, you have a lot of experience building really powerful communities and keeping up the engagement. That's kind of what you do, at least in the context that I know you in. So if people do want to reach out to you, what's the best way for them to follow you, connect with you?
Yeah, most definitely. So you can find me on LinkedIn, Michelene Wilkerson. So M-I-C-H.
We'll throw that in the show notes, and nobody has to write anything, because it'll be in the show notes. Yeah.
So LinkedIn would be the best way. You can email me through my website if you have questions. My Instagram is hidden.
She's like,
but don't. My Instagram hidden.
I love it. You're like, how can we connect with you? And you're like, here's 2 ways. You ain't getting me on Instagram. Nope.
No, it is. I've had quite a number of people, just based on things I've done in the past. Like, they've tried to, and I have a kind of like very obvious, but also discreet Instagram name. But they're like, you know what? We're going to like sift through and find you on Instagram.
I'm very competitive. I feel like I might need to do this now.
Yeah. Like there's some stealth methods of, finding people if you want to find them. So
that's one thing about me. You never want to give me a challenge or tell me I can't do something, because then I'll be like, hey, you'll have a request in your inbox. I'm pretty sure this is you, but maybe not. We'll see.
Well, this was amazing.
Yeah, Michelene, it was so fun. We'll have to have you back on. I think we've got a whole nother episode here we can talk about. Man, there's like, I'm always listening for like topics with people we can get deeper on. I'm like, there. I'm like, there's like 8 different things, and we'll save it for next time. Gotta have people come back.
And that's
well, before we leave, love if you'd leave us with some short and sweet words of wisdom, something sentence or less.
Trust the process.
Trust the process. Trust the process. Thank you, Michelene. Keep doing what you're doing, and we'll have you back on again soon.
Thanks for listening to another episode of Talking to Cool People with Jason Frizzell. If you enjoyed today's episode, please tell your friends. Follow us on Instagram and Facebook, and give us a shout out, or take a moment to leave a review on iTunes. If something from today's episode piqued your interest and you'd like to connect, email us at podcast@jasonfrizzell.com. We love hearing from our listeners because you're cool people too.